Prime Minister Mark Carney says he has not spoken with U.S. President Donald Trump since trade talks came to a halt, something Trump says he has no plans to change, even though both leaders are heading to the APEC summit.
I don't want to meet with him. I'm not going to be meeting with him for a while, no. I'm very happy with the deal we have right now with Canada, and we're going to let it ride.
When asked about Trump's comments, Carney said it's up to the Americans.
Look, we stand ready to sit down with the United States, myself with the President, my colleagues with their colleagues, when the U.S. is ready to sit down.
The collapse in talks comes in response to the Ontario government's anti-tariff ad playing on U.S. networks. It, of course, featured the words of former U.S. President Ronald Reagan. Now, Trump has threatened to impose an additional 10% tariff on Canada. For more insight into all this, David Frum is a staff writer at The Atlantic and former speechwriter for President George W. Bush. David, thanks for doing this. I wonder if you have a sense of what it is about this ad that provoked such ire from Trump.
Trump is feeling political tides pushing very fast or pulling very fast against him on the trade issue. The Trump tariffs are unpopular. The Trump tariffs against Canada are remarkably unpopular. On CNN just a few minutes ago, Harry Enton, their pollster, had data that showed that Trump is a net unfavorable of 10. Canada in the United States is a net positive of 49. So Canada is 60 points more popular in the United States than Trump. So this is a poorly chosen trade war. And indeed, I think the thing that upset so much about that Ontario ad was you can sort of sell the tariffs to Americans if they think it's about China. They may not be completely, they may not like paying more for all the things they're paying more for. They may be unhappy about the loss of agricultural markets. There's a lot of ill will toward China. But when you say, you're carrying on a trade war against Canada, against Mexico, and against all your European partners and all your Asian partners all at the same time, then people, well, why would we be doing that? I'm paying more for the pasta made from Canadian durum wheat. I'm paying more for bacon and pork shoulder. I'm paying more for aluminum cans in which my soda and beer come. For what? That's why it was so sensitive. And he's got another problem, which is the Supreme Court of the United States will very shortly hear oral arguments challenging the legality of most of Trump's tariff structure. And the legal outlook for Trump looks dark. He has pushed emergency presidential economic powers in ways they were never intended to go. He has taken on powers that are much greater than those Congress ever delegated to him. The power to impose tariffs is not a presidential power, it's a congressional power. And he may be afraid he's about to lose that case. One last point. The revenue from tariffs has been quite important to Trump's fiscal schemes. He's raising more than $30 billion a month from tariffs imposed on American families. That is significant money in the United States.
Threatening to add 10% tariffs because he's upset about an ad probably doesn't bolster his legal case. But I have been surprised by.
No, that's not a satirical point. That is actually because the argument is Trump's legal argument is this: the law gives me powers to impose certain economic measures in a true economic emergency. And one of the questions is going to be is a factual question. Well, is there an economic emergency? What is the nature of this economic emergency that allows you to, as president, to use a power that is otherwise reserved for Congress? And Doug Ford hurting my feelings is not going to impress the Supreme Court as much of an emergency.
It felt like, I was down in D.C. for inauguration week, and it felt like then they were trying to do some of the academic and legal legwork around tariffs, and now they just sort of throw them out willy-nilly. But I want to ask you about the response from both the Reagan Foundation and the White House. This claim that Ronald Reagan was somehow in favor of tariffs. Yes, he had some tariffs, but that whole speech was about how he didn't like imposing them because he doesn't think they work in the long term.
Yeah. Well, what happened at the Reagan Foundation is a terrific example of why the United States has the problem with Trump it does. Trump is massively unpopular in the United States, but he's achieved this ascendancy within the Republican Party, trafficking in the moral weakness of people who should know better. Now, the board of directors of the Reagan Foundation, they don't owe Donald Trump anything. They are there to conserve and protect the legacy of Ronald Reagan. And everyone who cares about Ronald Reagan knows what that legacy is, what he was for, what he was against. And it's not just this one radio address. There are hundreds of speeches. Ronald Reagan signed the U.S.-Canada Free Trade Agreement. He set in motion the negotiations that would become the NAFTA extension with Mexico. He talked through the 1976 and 1980 campaigns. 1976 when he lost, 1981 when he won with free trade in North America. It's just key to who he is, and everyone on the Reagan board would know that. So why do they do this thing? It's because they lack backbone, and that's a general problem within the Republican Party.
And I think that is part of one of the really interesting debates going on in this country, is whether this ad was successful, whether it achieved what it set out to do, because it certainly has a cost. We've seen the trade talks called off in a threat of 10%. But there's a notion that it has also made a very clear line between those willing to back Trump and say, oh, no, tariffs are fine, they're great, even Ronald Reagan liked them, and those who say, I can't back that. Yes, Ronald Reagan was against tariffs. My God, that's not too hard. Is there some truth to that part of it?
It was super successful, in my opinion. You're familiar, I think, with the term the Streisand effect?
Yes.
Barbara Streisand had made this arrangement to have her Malibu house not on Google Maps or whatever the satellite service was, and then her house was listed there, and she made such a huge fuss that anyone who didn't know before that her house was there knew it after. So millions more people have seen this ad. And millions of more people have had to confront that Ronald Reagan thought one thing. And millions of more people, and this is the key point that Trump is so worried about, have been reminded that Trump is waging his trade war not just against China, but against Canada. And not just against Canada, but against Mexico, and against Britain, and against Germany, and against every American friend. This year, China will overtake the United States as Germany's most important trade partner. What kind of accomplishment is that?
Understanding the sort of philosophical approach to negotiations and the art of the deal, or whatever it is, with Donald Trump is really important for all of the world leaders trying to figure out how to navigate this moment. Carney has decided to say, hey, we're here. We'll talk whenever you're ready. Whenever you want, we'll sit back down and talk. Is that the right approach? I mean, it does feel like they could still bump into each other in the back hallway of the APEC summit and work something out.
I think that is one of the silliest things that people say about Donald Trump is they say, have you read The Art of the Deal? You should read The Art of the Deal to understand Donald Trump. So really, you've read The Art of the Deal? He hasn't. The man who wrote the book has made clear Donald Trump never read the book. And indeed, Donald Trump, he's not a deal maker. He is a predator. Deal makers understand that to complete a transaction in a market economy, both parties have to agree that they are better off, or else the transaction won't happen. Donald Trump's view of all transactions, not just trade, but all economic transactions, is somebody wins and somebody loses. That's why he was famous, for example, for never paying his subcontractors when he did real estate projects. Now, no successful real estate developer in the world can afford a reputation as someone who consistently refuses to pay contractors, because then you won't have contractors. That's a crook. That's someone who's not a great deal maker. And I think that is a mistake that a lot of people have about him. He is a predator. He backs down. He asserts dominance when he can, and he backs down when anyone is able credibly to assert dominance against him. As his position in the country weakens over the coming year, a lot of these discussions that seem so difficult now will get easier. And Canada will do better in conversations in 2026 than it can possibly do in conversations in 2025.
All right. We're going to leave it there. David, really appreciate your insight as always. Thanks for this.
Thank you. Bye-bye.